Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today to talk about supporting children as they develop empathy skills in virtual, hybrid, and physically distant learning formats. My name is Caitlin Powell, and I'm an Early Childhood Project Associate with the University of Virginia.
And hey, I'm Stephanie Adams. I'm a Stream and 3 curriculum coach with UVA. So today we're going to talk about empathy. And when we talk about empathy, we're talking about our awareness of others' emotions and our ability to imagine how someone else is feeling. Empathy is different from sympathy because it involves perspective taking. So imagining myself as that person in that situation. Dr. Brene Brown, author and research professor at the University of Houston, put it this way. She said, empathy is feeling with people. Empathy is all about caring for others because we can imagine how they feel, but not because we feel bad for them. We teach empathy because we want children to understand how others feel and respond with care and kindness. As they develop empathy, preschoolers first need a basic understanding of emotions. Then they begin to understand that everyone has emotions and needs, and that those needs may, and a lot of times are, very different from their own. They also learn that they can help to meet others' needs. But it all starts, again, with an understanding of emotions, both our own and others' emotions. So as a side note, in a different video that you can find on ecevirginia.org, Caitlin and I actually talked about helping children recognize and describe their emotions. You should check that out to hear some other strategies that you can use to help children to recognize their own emotions, as well as connect with emotions of others in a variety of learning environments. And speaking of a variety of learning environments, it's especially important that we help children develop empathy this year because we're all living through a global pandemic that has changed the lives of everyone we know in so many different ways and in ways that we're still working through. We need even more understanding and we need more kindness and care in our communities right now. So teaching empathy through virtual, hybrid, and physically distant in-person learning formats is possible, but it's going to look different this year than it did in previous years. So today we're going to talk about ways that you can adapt what you've always done to support empathy for these different learning environments. We're going to focus on 3 specific strategies today. Those strategies are narrate and label empathy. They are to prompt children to consider the needs and feelings of others. And finally, prompting children to provide care for others. So as we talk through the strategies today, please take notes and jot down your ideas. And after you watch, use the accompanying guide that'll help you reflect and collaborate with others, and also help you plan to support children's empathy. All right, Caitlin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Okay, so let's get started with our first strategy for today, which is to narrate and label acts of empathy. I think that it's just really important to start by saying that empathy education cannot be taught with a whiteboard or by memorizing a definition or in isolation for children to really, truly, and deeply understand how it relates to their everyday lives. So instead, the concept of empathy can be integrated into daily conversations, routines, and during the activities and lessons that you've already planned. With this in mind, narrating and labeling empathy is such a great strategy because it can just happen all day, every day. You can call attention to examples of empathy and acts of kindness all around you, either through books or classroom examples or shows, digital media, personal stories from your communities, or even your own acts of empathy. It can feel a little bit awkward at first to call attention to your own acts of empathy, but we don't often seek recognition when we empathize, but it's just so helpful for children to get those real life and relatable examples, and especially from a trusted adult, which would help them to really begin to understand and develop empathy. So one scenario for narrating and labeling your own empathy could be something like, say your children are having a center time, when you might hear or notice from a distance that there's a child at another center that's having a hard time. You might hear yelling or see throwing of arms, knocking toys over. And you could use that by, saying to your small group that you're working with, I see that Melissa is really frustrated with the train tracks. I'm going to go over there and see if I can help her. Another example for narrating and labeling could be, when you narrate your own actions for the child that you're actually modeling with. So, I think that you are feeling sad that your friend doesn't want to play. Could I sit with you for a while? Just a quick and easy comment like this can help draw attention to empathy in a way that really makes sense to children and helps them begin to develop and understand empathy more deeply. Other than your own actions, there are examples of empathy all around us if we just remember to notice and then remember to intentionally and regularly label and narrate for children to notice them too. When I think about this, I always think about this really great book called Be Kind by Pat Zietlow and Jen Hill. And this book really beautifully just explains how when we understand how others are feeling, we can provide care by giving, helping, paying attention, saying nice things. It's just loaded with examples of empathy where you could just highlight and label them throughout. There's one part and you could say something like, she made cookies for Mr. Rinaldi because he lived alone. I think that she understood that he might feel lonely and she wanted to show that she cared by sending a homemade treat. And like I mentioned before, narrating and labeling empathy can easily be done in virtual, hybrid, or socially distanced classrooms. We can do this in our own conversations and activities with children in any setting. And you could do it either in the moment or as you reflect on experiences from the past. And in a virtual setting where there might not be as many classroom examples like the center time one that I mentioned before, we can instead look for places to highlight empathy more in social conversations. Like you mentioned having cookies and milk with your grandma sometimes. How do you feel when you have cookies and milk with her? I wonder how she feels when she has cookies and milk with you. Or you could bring attention to empathy by screen sharing pictures, books, or video clips to really bring these examples to life. And as children begin to transition from virtual to in-person instruction, there might be even more opportunities to narrate and label your own acts of empathy. It is not uncommon, as I'm sure you know, for preschoolers to feel some level of separation anxiety. But now imagine the potential for that after children have spent months at home with caregivers and a whole lot of togetherness. But with the right foundations of relationships and just a little extra comfort and support, I think children will be able to adjust and learn a little bit about empathy along the way. So say if there's, one child who's regularly having a hard time at drop off, you could turn it into a learning experience by sharing with the class that Joe is really sad today about leaving his mom, and I'm going to sit with him and I'll rub his back to help him feel safe and calm in our classroom. As you narrate and label empathy, just remember that the more regularly and consistently you can narrate throughout the day, throughout the year, regardless what setting you're in, the more the children will be able to translate this to their own lives and experiences in the future.
I love that because the next strategy is to prompt children to consider the needs and feelings of others. And that's just something that's going to help them, right now where they're at learning, but also in the future. It's going to take us helping them know when to consider the needs and feelings of others and also how to do it. So we can prompt children to consider others' needs and feelings when their actions can be linked to another's feelings. So this is a direct link. This is a strategy that's ideal for when children are interacting with their peers in hybrid or physically distant settings, because their peers' emotional reactions to their own actions are going to be immediate and evident and relatable. They're going to be right then. So you could ask them to think about how they feel or maybe have felt when a specific incident has happened to them. So for example, you could say, how do they feel when you push by them to get to the front of the line? Do you think they're excited to go outside like you? Or you could say something like, wow, you noticed your friend was having trouble with the paper towel dispenser and you were really kind to help them after they washed their hands. Has that ever happened to you before? How do you think they felt when they couldn't do it by themselves? Children may need our help to recognize and describe others' emotions, and so a feelings chart in these situations would be really helpful when promoting children to identify the emotions of others as they consider their feelings. You could also encourage children to consider the needs of dolls or stuffed animals during play. During choice time, you could join their play and say, oh, your baby is crying. What do you think is bothering them? With distancing requirements in place in many classrooms, There might be fewer natural opportunities to do this, so you'll need to be really intentional about using these moments when they happen to prompt children to consider others' feelings. I also want to take a moment to think about who we encourage children to have empathy for. I recently read an article published by the Making Caring Common project at Harvard's Graduate School for Education. And it encouraged adults to expand children's circle of concern, meaning the people for whom children demonstrate empathy. The article pointed out that it can be easier for children to show empathy for family members and close friends, or just people who are like them in some other way. Many of us tend to live near and socialize with people who look and speak and worship and just live like us, which can make it difficult for children to get to know people who are different from them. Our own biases and our preferences for familiarity or comfort keep us from diversifying experiences and diversifying our social networks. Also, children are seeing fewer people now because of COVID restrictions. And so we're gonna have to be even more intentional, the article goes on to say, about helping children consider the needs and feelings of other people who are different from them. So we've thought of a few ways that you can offer opportunities for children to interact with other people, even now. So you could invite guests, maybe children's extended family members or trusted members of the school community who are different from the students in some way. You can invite them to join your virtual meetings every once in a while so that children get to learn about them and more easily can take on their perspectives. You could also partner with a class from a different school in your area or even from a different state or a different country to exchange notes and pictures and videos with children who look and live differently from them. The point here is that we need to help children understand that the world is full of diverse people with whom they can empathize. So in addition to considering helping children consider the needs and feelings of people who are different from them, you'll also want to prompt children to consider the feelings of others who they didn't have a hand in evoking. So this will be like puppets or characters in books, pictures or short video clips. If you're teaching virtually, you're likely going to use this approach more often. The situations and scenarios, if they're not familiar to children, you can just scaffold children's understanding of others' feelings and needs by linking them to children's lives. So for example, in one of my favorite books, Whistle for Willie, a little boy named Peter struggles to learn how to whistle. He tries and he tries and he just can't do it. So while reading, you could prompt children to think about how Peter feels, maybe by saying, Peter keeps trying to whistle, but he just can't do it. Have you ever tried to do something, but no matter how hard you tried, you just couldn't? How did you feel? How do you think Peter feels? Do you think he feels the same way? Broadening the example, an example like this will help children understand Peter's emotions, even if they've never tried to whistle themselves. Another way, similarly, to support children to think about the needs and feelings of others, part of being empathetic is just listening to others as they're sharing their feelings and needs. One super engaging way to help children do this and to practice empathetic listening is to use puppets. You could have the puppet in your morning meeting tell a relatable story and share how it felt, and then have the puppet ask the children if they can imagine feeling that way. It would give children an opportunity to practice using their vocabulary, their emotions vocabulary, and to share their own experiences too. You could also scaffold the types of story that the puppet shares to be a little less relatable, to increase the challenge of understanding how someone else feels. As children begin to understand others' feelings and needs, they're likely going to want to help others to feel better. And I think Caitlin's going to give us some strategies for that.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Okay, so our last strategy for today is to prompt children to provide care for others. And so, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, we teach empathy because we want children to not only understand how others feel, but we also want them to respond to others with care and with kindness. And so we can help them with this by providing plenty of opportunities for them to practice providing care to others, including people and pets, in meaningful ways. And some of these opportunities can truly be as simple as just an ongoing dialogue with a focus on empathy. such as, when you notice children feeling sad or angry or worried, you could say something like, what do you think could help them feel better? Would a hug make them feel happier? And even directly to the student who may have been the one to make a child angry, we could go beyond the generic I'm sorry and prompt children to link their own actions with the other child's feelings and then consider how they could make that child feel better. Outside of peers or people, even with a class pet, we could say something like, do you think our fish is feeling hungry? What should we do? And there are a couple other ways that we could support empathy by prompting children to provide care for others. One great approach that Stephanie touched on earlier is to engage in intentional dramatic play using dolls or roles that prompt children to care for others. So for example, we could say that the babies need regular bathing to feel clean and to feel cared for. And then children could take turns with water play, giving the baby dolls a bath. We can make sure that this is just an ongoing focus by building opportunities for caring into your classroom routines, like all of the ones that are shown here. And even if your students are virtual, we could prompt children to provide care in their own homes with the knowledge of their relatives or pets or plants, or even by designing an activity like maybe sending cards to classmates or even grandparents to help cheer them up if they might be feeling a little lonely these days. And again, as you transition back into the classroom, look out for empathy learning opportunities and pull your students in to think about those children who might need a little extra support adjusting. So you could say, I wonder if they might feel sad or nervous in our classroom tomorrow morning. And what do you think we could do to maybe make them feel more welcome and safe? And as children just kind of continually engage in these opportunities to provide care for others, it will become more and more natural for them to respond with empathy as the need arises in their day-to-day interactions inside and outside of the classroom.
So to recap, we've shared 3 strategies for helping children develop empathy. Those strategies, again, were narrate and label empathy, prompt children to consider the feelings and the needs of others, and to prompt children to provide care for others. I've also read a really good article in Psychology Today that stated empathy is a work in progress in childhood and beyond. And it's just helpful to remember that some children might not fully get it the first few times you narrate, or even the first few months that you narrate. Or maybe they'll understand and connect the ideas sometimes, but not others. Empathy is a really, really complex skill that takes time and consistency for children to deeply develop. But the more we highlight the real life examples, the better we can cultivate the conditions for empathy to one day flourish in all children. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching this presentation. Remember, the webinar is just a conversation starter. So make sure that you use the accompanying guide as you take time to reflect and connect the ideas to your own work and collaborate with others to support children as they learn to show empathy. For more information about supporting empathy and all of our other early childhood initiatives, make sure to check out our website at ecevirginia.org. Thanks so much. Have a good day.